Today we're going to talk about how to lose edges, and this is going to be done a different way, but I'll explain it. Let's get started. All right, I have the palette in a little box on the lower left, and I hope that's big enough. If it's not, let me know and I will redo this. I tried to do a split screen, but the split screen cut off most of the palette and most of the work on the easel, so that wasn't gonna uh, be a video that would be worth watching. So, but I think that this will be. Now, the other thing is, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can touch the screen where the video is. The three little dots will appear on the upper right, and you can either speed this up or slow it down. So just so that you know that you have control of doing that. So this is about losing edges. Losing edges, because we see edges everywhere, but the paintings that I really respond to have both edges that you see and also edges which get lost. So my goal today was to see how many edges I could lose. So the first thing I do is I'm mixing up a gray, and you can see that's, what is that? Cerulean blue, Naples yellow, and a permanent rose. That's kind of my go-to gray. So, and I'm doing this in I just realized that I'm doing this in real time, which is going to be, oh my gosh, if we do it in real time, this is going to be 32 minutes long. That's going to be too long. So I'm going to go in real time for a little while, and then I'm going to speed it up. But I wanted to show the process. So there's a mixing of a gray, and I always make a test dab. That's what that piece of paper is on the left, to make a test dab before I put it on the paper. Now I mixed up quite a bit of this gray because the gray is going to show up in the background a lot. Now I can mix up more of it if I need it, but I always like to make generous piles of paint so I don't get stingy. Now I decided that I could see in the photograph that it was getting warmer, that gray was getting warmer as it came around, and so I added some Naples yellow to it. And so see, that's just slightly, I don't think it changed the value at all, but it did change the color a little bit. I didn't make a test dab for that because I painted long enough that I knew for sure that that was going to be okay. You know, I always say if you can use two colors to accomplish one task, that's kind of a good thing. So I went in, what I'm doing right now is I'm grabbing a tiny, tiny bit of cadmium yellow and adding that to the gray because I'm going to see if I can even warm it up a little bit more. But I do emphasize a tiny bit of cadmium yellow because cadmium yellow packs a lot of punch. See, you can see it's way more yellow there than it was with the Naples. All right, so the background is pretty much accomplished. Oh, and I should say I'm working on, the piece of paper is about it's about an 8x8 Arch cold press block, and the paintbrush I'm using is it's a red sable, Kolinsky red sable brush, and it is it's 1 inch wide at the bottom. It seems to be about the biggest brush I can find for a watercolor brush. I'm looking to find something bigger. All right, so I'm going to watch and see what happens next. I dried everything, and which I use a hairdryer because I don't have the patience to wait for things to dry. Oh, it's back. I guess things weren't dry enough. You know, you can tell on your paper if something's dry. You know, you can see it glisten a little bit, or I'll also do the feel test. You know, feel it with my fingers really lightly. Don't press hard because you'll leave a fingerprint. All right, so drying this off. And let's see, nothing's changed on the palette. But I think what I'm going to do next is, I think I want to get the shadow in. Let's see. Nope, I seem to be adding cadmium yellow. Oh, I remember. Yes, I am going to work on the shadow. The shadow is real important because it was really warm where the shadow begins, underneath the little honey pot, and also there's a little bit of warmth underneath where the cup is, or a little bowl. I'm not sure what to call that. The reason I'm showing this and showing this in real time is I wanted you to see how long it takes and how thoughtful you have to be about making these decisions. Oh, I see. I didn't go into the background. I went right for the lost edge. All right, so this is good because I can speed it up after this. I decided that inside that cup it was warmer than it was behind the cup. So I added, you could see I was fiddling around. There's some cadmium yellow in there. There's some Naples yellow in there. I wanted to warm it up. Now, if you squint your eyes, I don't think there's any difference between the background color and the color that you see through the cup. But there is a temperature difference. And one is warmer, which is inside the cup, and one is cooler, which is outside the cup. But I'm not going to paint the what do you call it, the line that I drew, because there is no line. If you look at the photograph, even the line disappears. The background and the space inside the cup become one. And anytime I could see something which didn't have a color, didn't have a value change, but had a slight temperature change, then I was going to see if I could accomplish that. All right, I'm going to say that again because it's a little bit complicated. In order to lose an edge, when I get to the edge of something, or I see the edge of something, if I can make the color, if I can mix up the exact same value, and then just as what's behind it or what's next to it, and then decide if it's warmer or cooler, I can adjust the color next to it and create what I call a lost edge. Now, you just saw me mix up a lot of paint on the palette and then get rid of it because I was going down the wrong road. I know what happened was I kept mixing and mixing, and somehow I was veering toward green. You know, so far everything's pretty neutral. Not black and white neutral. You know, there's some color in my neutrals, but let's see what happens here. I hope I was clear about that losing of the edge. The values have to be the same. The temperature is what shifts. And if you can do that, you can create a lost edge. I finally said it clearly. That's really what I meant to say. I'm mixing up that gray again, which is cerulean blue, a permanent rose, and yep, here comes the Naples yellow, my go-to gray. It's a go-to gray, but there's a lot of cerulean blue in it. Okay, so that's leaning a little bit towards violet or purple. I'm going to put in the dark shadow now. Now, the dark shadow is what's underneath the honey pot and the cup. It also connects the honey pot and the cup. So now there's a value change. It's a very slight value change. You know, everything in this picture is basically values 1 through, I'm going to say 3, maybe. So the value changes are very subtle, but the temperature changes hopefully are not. So I'm mixing up an orange of some kind. Oh, I know what I did. So there's a little bit of orange, there's some cadmium red, and a little bit of cadmium yellow. Because if I really, really squinted my eyes, I could see both violet, like a violet underneath the cup, and the honey pot, and also a little tiny bit of red, or what appeared to be an orangish red, which was coming or either from the honey pot or perhaps from the lollipop. I'm not sure. I didn't feel like this was dark enough or blue enough. I'm not sure. There we go. I shifted it. You see the shift in one? The dab I did before was more violet. This is more blue. There we go. It's not much of a moment. Takes a lot of mixing for, you know, making that one moment. Seems ridiculous. All right, the contact point underneath is what's dark. So I want to get that in. And I use as few strokes as possible. And you saw how I carefully figured out what color that was. Now I'm going to add that little bit of orange that I see. There we go. And let them, they're going to mix together on the paper because they're wet. And on the bottom, under the bowl, I saw the contact point was dark, but then after that, the shadow became not as dark as the contact point. Now I know on the picture that the shadow looks quite gray, but I didn't want this to be a painting that's all gray. So I'm putting, if I can, putting color in where gray exists. And I'm using this slightly orangish color for a gray. And here again, see, I'm losing an edge there. Should lose an edge there because it's the exact same color I use for the shadow. Same thing there. I'm doing everything I can not to create, well, what a friend just wrote and said, She called it wire, you know, a line that just is all by itself for no reason. And she said a former teacher had described it as a wire, and that's now stuck in my brain. I think that's really well put. Now, the other thing that's happening here with all my color dabs is you can see they're all grayed down to some extent. And that's because, you know, in other words, the base color for everything has been that gray that I mixed up. And that's because the gray is in the table. The gray I already put underneath as the background. Gray is kind of the foundation that everything is built on. That first gray wash that I put in. All right, now this was carefully figured out. There is a dark, you can see that shadow as it runs through the cup or the bowl. And I'm trying to figure out what shape that is here. But you can see how slow it goes. Because you probably stopped watching by now because, oh my gosh, it's so slow. But, you know, painting is more about mixing the paint than it is about applying the paint. It's a very strange thing. Because you can paint for a long period of time, you know, lots and lots of licking the paper, you know, dab, 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 and it can amount to not very much. But if you're really deliberate about your big value shapes, then something that looks like nothing, and right now I admit this looks like nothing, you know, you kind of have the leap of faith here, but it will turn into something. The other challenge that's happening here is unless I'm absolutely sure of what I see, you know, if there's any visual confusion, I'm not going to record that. I have to simplify and make sure that absolutely everything that I see is really indeed something that I see. And, you know, it's almost like asking myself over and over and over again, are you sure? Are you sure you see that? Are you sure? All right, now it's time for the honey pot. And so I'll do that in real time and then I'll speed things up. So I'm using cadmium yellow. There's a little bit of cadmium red. I grabbed some quinacridone sienna and also some quinacridone gold. My goal here, because everything so far has been really neutral, is I want to have a really saturated color spot or two in this painting that will command attention. So I'm carefully dialing this in. You know, you can see it's looking pretty fiery over there. Yeah, see, oh, look at that. Yeah, quite a difference from what we've had before. That's a very saturated color. And the first thing I put in is the value shape that I see. I want to make that really rich and really definitive. In other words, really saturated and not overwork it. And I know that I didn't even mix the paint really well together because I wanted, you know, it's kind of like frosting on the brush. The brush is going to deposit a little bit of yellow and a little bit of that red. You can see because I have that one stroke thing going on there, but on a really big brush. But that saturated color is really important. So that's going to be the darkest part of the honey pot, except for the lid. Now I can add what I saw as being the lighter parts of the honey. And the honey is going to show up on the cup too because it's adjacent. It throws some color onto that cup. So I'm going to have to take care of that too. I think I probably gray it down a little bit because I think that, yeah, see, I put that same yellow that I used in the honey pot, I put it right in the gray that I mixed because I know looking through that cup that it's going to gray it down a little bit. So it can't be quite as saturated as what was in the honey pot itself. And now I'm going to go, I suspect, and put it in and see, and that's the part that goes through the glass that you can see through the glass. It has to be grayer because you're seeing through one layer of glass. So, you know, I'm hoping that this pretty well describes, first of all, how to lose an edge, and also how to very carefully build toward what is really a very, very simple painting. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to speed it up, and then we'll finish the painting. All right, see you in 1 second. All right, here we go. Now we're speeded up. It'd be fun if in real life you could paint this fast, but in reality, this probably took about an hour to do. But you can see the paint dabs are starting to add up. And in the end, there are going to be quite a few of them. Some of them I used, some of them I didn't use, but I have to see them exactly right next to the painting that I'm working on. I can't look at something on the palette and determine if it's going to work or not. So now I'm all involved in the honey pot, which is admittedly the funnest part. I love saturated color and I love color shapes, but I'm coming from a place where that's all I saw was saturated color and color shapes, and I want things. And now in my paintings, I want things quieted down quite a bit, and I want to have some places that are busy. I want to have some places that are quiet, um, and I want to have a variety of lost and found edges. Everybody is. This is just what I'm interested in right now. When you paint, you find things that you're interested in, and then you find, and then you move on to the next thing that interests you. But right now, especially painting glass, it's kind of forcing me to not be interested, but to exercise what I'm talking about in a disciplined way, because glass just doesn't allow for real masses of bright color. There, I really like with that underneath the honey pot. That was a nice reinforcement of that color coming from the honey pot. I must have been in my painter brain by now. You shift over from your thinking brain to your painter brain, and I just could dial in exactly what not only the temperature but the color underneath that honey pot. I don't know how I did that, but probably because I practice and because I paint every day. Here comes a lollipop, very saturated. But it also leaves a trail of color around it, and I need to account for that. But again, like I said at the very beginning, unless I see it, unless I'm sure that I see it, I'm not going to record it. But there were some places where the light from the lollipop seemed to bounce around. So I found those spots. So things are looking a little bit more like what I intended them to look like. That there's a glass bowl in front of the honey pot. Now I got to fill in what's left and not overpaint and leave lost edges. So it's such a temptation to make that line down the right-hand side of the glass, but don't do it. Keep that lost edge. That's what I'm saying to myself at this point. The interior thing of what I'm saying is don't. Oh my gosh. It's almost like you have to police yourself because it's so tempting because you want to paint everything you see, but you don't need to paint everything you see. That's what I'm learning at this point. So we're getting pretty near the end of the painting. Now, I should preface this by saying near the very end of the painting, I went and I cleaned my water. I had some time to think about what had happened, and I just didn't feel like I had gotten quite where I wanted to go. That often happens. And I didn't film what I call the final adjustments. But the final, and you'll see it in the final piece, but in the final adjustments, I never put or change anything from the plan I had at the very beginning. But and I also make sure that I have my lightest light, which is that light on the left side of the honey pot exists, and my darkest dark is, I think it might be the lollipop, underneath the lollipop stick there. That became really important. And instead of making that a gray, you can see that that's almost a purple. But look at the color dabs adding up. Holy smokes, that's a lot. Yeah, here's where I was when I thought I was done, and I was happy with the lost edges. But I went back in, and there's the finished piece. I'm not sure there's much of a difference between what you see here and what you saw on the easel. Oh, and anyway, so that's about lost edges. And take a look at it. You can see there's lots of lost edges, but you can still see that things are there. They're there, and they're not there. So remember to keep the whites of your paper white, your paints wet, mass for value, mix for color. If you're watching this and haven't joined my YouTube channel yet, come ahead and join. And I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.